Welcome to the Ladies Who Leverage podcast. I'm your host, Kelly Charles Collins. And I know that you know we're on hiatus for the summer, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't get amazing content. So I'm going to share with you some interviews I did with some of the women in Ladies Who Leverage. We had an amazing series called What's the Tea during Women's History Month, where we talked about things from self-care to women in work to empowerment and also about relationships. So I'm going to share those with you so that you have some amazing new content. You're going to find that the ladies had some great strategies and tips and tactics for navigating the world as women. So I hope you enjoy this series. And again, if you want to know more about Ladies Who Leverage, we are a global network of diverse women who collaborate to leverage our influence, to increase our income, and create impact so we can live life unapologetically AF. You can always go to ladieswholeverage.com to learn more or join us in our Facebook group. So for now, I want you to enjoy this series. It was our What's the Tea series. I want you to enjoy that. We talked about self-care. We talked about women in work. We talked about empowerment, and we talked about relationships. And as always, make sure that you subscribe to the podcast so that you never miss an episode. And please leave a review and share it with your network. Bye for now. Welcome to this episode of What's the Tea, which is sponsored by Ladies Who Leverage, and it's real women having real conversations. And we decided to do this in honor of Women's History Month. Today, we're going to be talking about relationships, expectations versus reality. I am your host and moderator, Kelly Charles Collins. I am the founder and CEO of Ladies Who Leverage. I'm also the host of the Ladies Who Leverage podcast. And as a former attorney, employment law attorney, companies hire me to keep them on the right side of the next hashtag movement. And I do that by training on unconscious bias, bystander intervention, courageous conversations, and sometimes workplace investigations. But today, I am here with the amazing women of Ladies Who Leverage. And Ladies Who Leverage is a global community where we empower women to leverage their expertise, resources, and relationships to build their business, brand, and badassery. And you're going to see all that badassery here today. So as we go through, I will introduce the ladies to you the first time that I ask them a question, so you get some context around who you are listening to. But we're going to dive right in to talking about relationships. If you have any questions, please post them in the Q&A or the chat if you're with us live on Zoom. If you are on Facebook, feel free to drop them in the comment section and we'll go through and answer any questions or read any comments that you may have for the women. So I'm going to get started with this whole thing about we have been in basically isolation, right? Because of COVID. And what I want to know from you all is, what have you learned about relationships in this time of COVID? And I'm going to start with Ty, because Ty is all about, what I love about Ty is one of the things, you see her with these poses every morning, like in these pictures that she does, and there's such peace and serenity around her. So I'm going to pose it to Ty first, but I want to introduce you. So Ty Miles is a certified personal coach, business strategist, personal branding expert, international speaker, and entrepreneur. She specializes in online visibility and business growth strategy, along with spiritual success principles, positive psychology coaching, and neuro-linguistic techniques. She supports her clients to express their authenticity, leverage their expertise, challenge their fears, and take the risks necessary to attain their boldest goals. That is a mouthful, Ty, but I know you are brilliant. So
thank you for that introduction, Kelly.
You're welcome. So Ty, tell me, what have you learned about relationships during this period where we have been basically isolated in our homes due to COVID?
So just straight to the point, what I've learned the most, COVID has taught me in terms of relationships, is that those who are thinking about you and those who really care about you, like keep you top of mind, those are the ones that reach out. I've noticed that. I've also been intentional with the very same things. From my personal relationships, family, relatives, to business. those who were used to seeing me often at events. I work fully online, so in the online space is a little bit different because we don't congregate, we don't see each other in the workspace every single day, but we were having meetings or we were going to events several times a month. And what I realized through COVID is that, one, you have to be very intentional with relationships, but the ones that reach out to you, you need to like put an asterisk mark by their name so that you can remember those. Those are the people who you're on top of their mind because they've taken the time in this busy COVID, in this busy pandemic, to think about you, whether it's, hey, I thought about you for this event. How are you doing? Check in. Those individuals are the ones, those relationships with those individuals who have reached out, who just taken that small 10 seconds to say hello, has really shown me like just the value of relationships and how much you mean to those individuals outside of out of sight, out of mind. So outside of the normalcy of seeing them frequently.
Thank you for that. I love that. Just who really is caring about you, right? And you learn those things when you're in times of grief or in times of strife. Who are the people that just reach out just because? So I love that answer. Sandy, I want to pose the same question to you. And let me introduce Sandy to you. I love Sandy's bio. With over 22 years, which is my favorite number, 22, in the car business, Sandy is passionate about protecting profits through compliance, programs, and training. She opened IAHR in 2017. It's a recruiting business. And in 2019, received Tampa HR's award for HR Consultant of the Year. The proud single mom of her daughter, Ariana, Sandy is also an avid salsa dancer. She is. And in her spare time, when the pandemic is over, you'll find Sandy on the dance floor. So if you're a salsa dancer and you're looking for a partner, you got Sandy over there.
It really is. I miss dancing so much. So much.
So what have you learned about relationships during this time of COVID?
This is such a great question. And the first thing that pops into my mind, Kelly, is that the thing that I've learned is that relationships don't depend on proximity, because this right here is a great example of how I've started to build relationships with people that I never would have met probably without the pandemic. There were so many more Zooms. It's almost like a verb now. Should we Zoom when I meet somebody? And I've been just blessed with that and I have found I could name 3 people just off the top of my head that I've built stronger relationships with. They were professional relationships, acquaintances, and now I call them dear friends because we talk. I don't know what happened, but we talk even more. So I think that's the big one for me, is that relationships don't really depend on proximity.
Lisa Carper, let's bring you in. I don't know what, I have a frog in my throat, y'all. So Lisa Carper, okay, do y'all see her glasses? I love Lisa Carper. I just love Lisa Carper, just so y'all know that. Lisa Carper is a freelance instructional designer for Room 435. She previously served as continuing education director for Trial Guides and in a similar role for LexisNexis. Lisa plans to be the American version of J.K. Rowling. Until that happens, though. She's very happy and excited to be in e-learning. So Lisa, tell me, what have you learned about relationships during COVID?
So I think the best example from my life is between my husband and myself. I have been managing remote teams for almost 12 years now. So I was very accustomed. I was a Zoom user when it was in beta. Mm-hmm. I was very accustomed to having team meetings, to conducting and directing photo shoots from afar. However, my husband is a truck driver. So he's much more into the physical and the tactile. So while I hate to say that the pandemic didn't really change my outlook all that much, because I was already kind of in that virtual world by the nature of my profession. it drove my husband crazy. Like, he needs to like get out of the house and do something and physically do something, or, he's going to strangle someone. So it reminded me again about the different ways people learn and the different ways people interact with the world. My husband's very tactile. I'm very social and very visually stimulated. So I could have this conversation with you ladies and feel fulfilled. But unless my husband is sitting across the table from his friend, he feels like they're out in the nether. So I think that's an important thing to know what type of learner you are, what type of social being you are. And that's what I've learned from the pandemic.
Thank you for that. Cindy Constable. So I say I love all of them. I do love all of them. They're amazing women, so you need to get to know them. But Cindy Constable is a strategist, international consultant, and speaker. Her goal is to elevate your company culture and bring integration between your leadership, vision, culture, and team members. So Cindy, what have you learned about relationships during COVID?
Thanks, Kelly. For me, I would say, I'm an extrovert too, and relationships have given a different view for me now that I haven't been able to like go anywhere and like hug people, because I'm a hugger. Anybody who knows me in real life knows I'm touchy-feely, huggy like that. For me, it's also brought out a realization that not only do people thrive differently, like Lisa's husband, but the trauma of the pandemic has affected people in different ways. And so understanding and having compassion and empathy for people during this time, more especially because we had a pandemic, we had a very polarizing political environment, and the pandemic also somehow became a political thing. And not everyone had the resources or the ability to deal in the same way. And so if someone has fallen out of touch or is not connecting the way they should, that doesn't mean that they didn't value the relationship that they had with you, or they weren't interested in keeping up the relationship. They may have had other things happening. So for me, it became incumbent to check on those whose behaviors shifted from what it normally was. So if we had a lot of in-person contact, initially we were texting and Zooming and doing things like that. But as the months wore on, and depending on where in the world you are, because I have clients and friends all over the world, in the US, we didn't experience lockdown the way some countries experience lockdown. So I have friends like, in the UK and Australia, who in Asia, who had serious lockdown. And so really reaching out and just touching in to make sure that they're okay and what's happening, and connecting with them on that human level, and sometimes just listening to what they needed to say without trying to coach them, train them, fix them, direct them. Just allowing and holding space for them is something that really came to my understanding. And also those dealing with, like depression or anxiety, mental health issues are really highlighted. And that became really close to my family issues that we understood and uncovered. So for me, it was just really about empathy and compassion for people, and understanding that we all were dealing, the best we could with what we had.
Yeah. Holding space is such an important thing. It's one of the things, it's one of my superpowers, is to hold space for people and to create safe spaces. And when we're in situations like the pandemic, and when we're in situations like we had with George Floyd, it is so important to, as you were saying, Cindy, observe behavior and changed behavior, right? So that we can really monitor the people who are around us to see how they're being affected, because they won't necessarily say, right, that they're being impacted. So definitely observing behavior is important. Stevie Dawn, Dr. Stevie Dawn, I want to bring you in so you can answer this question too, and then I'll have Teresa. So Dr. Stevie Dawn Carter is a professional speaker, coach, and consultant from Mansfield, Texas. She is a 4-time business owner spanning the for-profit and non-profit sectors. She has served in the United States Marine Corps. Thank you for your service. Danced on the Las Vegas Strip, and gone cage diving with great white sharks. If y'all don't think that these women are really, really badass, I mean, come on now. Come on now. Marine, Vegas strip dancer, not strip, like not stripping, dance, not that. On the Vegas strip. Dr. Stevie Don, I just gave you all kinds of stuff.
Wow, this is going to be all something different now. I can see where this is going. Cindy was talking about going viral. This is not what we meant.
This is
Not what we meant.
She has danced on the Vegas strip. And she's been in a cage with sharks. So her mission is to show entrepreneurs how to own their ocean and be the shark. So Dr. Stevie Don, tell me about what you've learned about relationships during COVID.
So I think, so much of what has been shared has been lessons I've learned as well. And as people have been talking and the women have been talking, I've just been like, yes, that was a good lesson. I think for me, what I would say is one of the lessons that I really learned during COVID and this time of lockdown is just the idea that we can over communicate too. We can overindulge in the need for conversation and connection. And I found that in myself. There were the first couple months, I was going to everything I could because I am an extrovert. So I went to every happy hour, every webinar. I had to just be with the people. But it went to a point where I would be one of those people that my behavior changed. I so communicated in this virtual world that I got exhausted. And then it was a self-care thing of the Zooms are exhausting. I mean, I can go to 8 hours of meetings, but somehow 8 hours of Zooms is just a different kind of energy. And so I found myself pulling back, right? Pulling away from conversation, pulling away. I stopped going to the happy hours. I stopped attending the webinars and being involved, especially on social media. I started taking more breaks. And I think we get to this place of communication and connection is important, but you also need to hold space for yourself to process whatever you need to process individually as well. And I think between being stuck in the home with our family, right, and having all the family quality time we could ever hope for in one area, and then on top of that, all of this virtual connection, I really learned the lesson of holding space for myself to be disconnected and have that be okay. Not have that be anything more than just keeping space for myself and protecting my own inner peace. And I think to Cindy's point of seeing that in other people, I would see other people disconnect and I might reach out and just say, hey, I'm disconnecting too. If you're just doing it because you just need space, I applaud you on that, right? It's still good to check in with them, make sure they're okay. But there's something about just taking time for your own peace that I found I really needed in 2020 because I was over connected and that kind of led me into a bad spot. Yeah. So
thank you for sharing that. Teresa Noy. So she is the divinity coach. Women work with her to unleash their divinity. She sparked her divine power to create an authentic life of endless possibilities when her son was diagnosed with autism. Today, she helps heart-centered women summon their God-given power to be the bold creators of their most authentic life. So Teresa, chime in on this question and what have you learned during COVID about relationships?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for us is that we just learned how to enjoy each other even more. I lived for 25 years on a college campus. So when we shut down, it was actually for me a celebration because all of the students left and I was no longer responsible for, over 2,000 students all the time at any time. So it was just like such a relief. And we were planning on leaving at that time anyway. So it was just like, wow, this is the perfect ending. Everyone's gone. And for like the first time, we had space just to be. And then I didn't have to do on top of that, all of the running around with my kids. So we just were able just to be. And that was just such a great gift for us. But in the midst of that, I also discovered how fragile we were, because at any time, when you get bad news about family members and friends, how they were being impacted, all of the race, civil unrest, and everything that was, also happening, we can go from here to here like that, right? So just holding space and just being really present in that time, and then moving through that to say, okay, how can we have fun? So we really just created lots of moments for celebrations, being really creative. I didn't know I could be that creative, but just being creative to just have fun and enjoy one another. And then the other thing is I discovered that, at any time, a relationship could be, you can reconnect with someone that you didn't even know was a person that you really enjoyed. Because when everyone started having all these Zoom meetings and I'm not an extrovert, right? So my tendency is to not want to do it. But there were some people that were special to me back in the day. And all of a sudden now everybody wants to connect, and I'm meeting with people that I haven't, met with in years. But it was like an aha moment, like, wow, like you're really cool, and so there have been friends that have, those relationships have been reignited. So just to be open, because you never know when a relationship can come in your life that will be meaningful.
Thank you for sharing that, Teresa. One of the other things that COVID did was to impact people professionally. A lot of people lost their jobs, lost their livelihoods, and I know that it has impacted some of the women in Ladies Who Leverage and the women who are here with us today. So I want to talk about that. When, if you've lost your position, I know Lisa, during the pandemic, you lost your job during the pandemic. How did that impact your relationships, your family relationship, maybe your friendships? What was the impact from that?
I was really shocked by it. And because prior to that, the product I'd been working on was producing the lion's share of the revenue that was coming in during those early COVID days. But I think it just put a lot of stress, because I'm the breadwinner in my family. My husband is disabled. So I had to, there was a sense of panic of trying to get to replace that income on a regular basis when there's nowhere else to go. And the state that I live in, Oregon, happens to have one of the worst rated unemployment systems in the country, so much so that you would call and it would just ring busy for hours and their systems would crash. And so it was almost 3 months before I got my first unemployment check. And then, of course, I got 8 in a row in the matter of 10 days. But the problem was, fortunately, I knew how, because I'd worked in local government in another life, I knew how to work the system. So I called up my state senator, Senator Betsy Johnson, and she got on the phone with me within 3 minutes, and I had a call from unemployment within a day. Now, what I worry about are those women or those people who don't know how to work the system, who don't know, yes, you can reach out to your elected official and you can say, help me with my problem. My state rep, I reached out to him too, never heard back. But my state senator, Betsy Johnson, I can't say enough good words about her because she was the difference for us. And she helped us get some medical insurance until we could get back on our feet, through the state. And it's those little things that make a huge difference in lives. And, people complain about our elected officials sometimes not getting stuff done. Well, when they're working behind the scenes as hard as these people like Senator Johnson were to make sure all of her constituents got what they needed during this awful time, when they've known for 5 years that the system that they had in place was inadequate to the task then 5 years ago, much less the rush of people this last year. Sorry to get on my soapbox, but I
We're gonna get you off your soapbox.
Elected officials who work hard on behalf of their constituents deserve to be, highlighted and upheld. And, if more people knew that they could reach out that way, I think we'd have a lot better functioning government.
Lisa, that's an important thing that you said about the people who don't know how to, maneuver and negotiate around in this and navigate the system, right? So many people lost their jobs and just had no idea what to do. Here in Florida, our unemployment system is like a joke, right? It is horrible. And so when I lost my job in 2019, I didn't lose my job. Right in the midst of the pandemic, it was the starting of the year. I'm a lawyer, and going on that system to try and navigate that system, I was like, oh my gosh, how can other people who just don't even have, some don't even have an education, right, get through these systems? So relationships are important in those aspects to help you to navigate some of these systems. And Sandy, I know that you also experienced a layoff, and I'm not sure if it was because of COVID, but I know that you experienced a layoff. And how did that impact your relationships? Because you went and started a whole business when that happened. You didn't go back to a job, you started a business. So how did that impact your relationships?
Well, I didn't, it was in 2017. So pre-pandemic, experiencing a layoff, pandemic or not, for me, it was the first time I had ever been laid off. I had my daughter was getting ready to turn 14 at the time. I'm a single mom. And I thought I was terrified. And I will admit, I think I did spend a couple of days in fetal position with with that. And I needed to. I needed to go ahead and do that. And the way it affected, then I decided to do that. There was a need, and I was gonna take a leap, right? So sometimes people say, oh, you have your own business, good for you. And I'm like, really didn't have a choice. Like, it was, my business was really born. I got the courage to do it, a courage born out of desperation, really. And I discovered that I'm really good at it. Like, I love what I do. The way that it affected my relationships, probably the biggest relationship that it started to affect was with my daughter. I found her saying things like, you're working all the time. It's because I was, so I had to, make special time for her. And then when the pandemic hit, we were here in the house together all the time, right? And a little miracle happened with that, because I hear mom, there's many books written about the sometimes difficult relationship between mothers and daughters, right? And and the teen years can be challenging from everything I hear. And I am so grateful for my women friends, other moms, because I was told, and particularly my cousin Barb, who said, this too shall pass, right? With that. And I found that in COVID, something happened. She was watching, right? You never know that they're watching what they're doing. And our relationship today is amazing. And during COVID, I'll brag on my daughter a minute. During COVID, she graduated from high school a year early. And July of 2020, I moved her up to Orlando, and she's now a student at Full Sail University, living like a big girl. So.
Thank you for sharing that. Has anybody had an experience? I'll ask this. Has anybody had an experience out of COVID? And I want to also move into what happened with George Floyd, because that also really impacted relationships. A lot familial relationships. People learned a lot about people that they live with, grew up with, hang out with around those topics. So I'm going to switch it to George Floyd. So, in the midst of the pandemic, we had another pandemic, right, related to race relations in this country that was really brought to the forefront because of George Floyd. And one of the things that I said in, doing all of my trainings is that George Floyd was not unique, right? That situation has happened all, it happens all of the time. What COVID did, though, was to make sure that nobody could say they didn't know, right? That they had not had the experience of seeing something like that. So it put it front and center. But I also know that it also brought up, and this over the past 4 years, right, brought up a lot of things that and feelings that people had, and people were now saying the quiet part out loud. So, Ty, how did, conversations around race and whether people, as I say, are either racist or racist adjacent or they're, anti-racist, how did that impact, if at all, any of the relationships that you had?
I think that it drew a stark contrast because I work in the online space and I love people, period. I love humans. And so this is one of the things that allowed me to see the difference in the character of the humans that when I was in their face, it was one thing, but in the midst of this George Floyd incident happening, that took this George Floyd incident that happened, now the race, it was just out there. Let's just put it out. It was just out there. And so I did have some individuals online check in. I had I experienced a lot of people, colleagues checking in on me. Ty, how are you? How is this affecting you? And then I had those that were silent. I'm in the coaching space. So these were also conversations that was going on in the online coaching world. How do we talk about this to our clients who are also trying to figure out how to navigate these conversations in their online coaching businesses? And there were bigger coaching companies coaching businesses that were not handling this conversation around race and race relations. And there were some who said something and probably should not have said something. And there was those who, because it was part of their culture, it really won them over. Like it really connected and resonated well with their audiences because of the intent in which they share. So I will say this, so there were people who were asking how I was doing. And this is one of the bigger things out of for me, asking how I was doing out of a feeling of obligation. And it was noticeable. I'm just going to go through the motions. Ty is the Black woman on our team. Ty is the Black woman doing this. We should check in on her. But they had never checked in on me, or I had any conversations with me prior to it. It was not genuine. Mm-hmm. And you could tell that. Then on the other side, it was those who always talked to me, whether it was frequently, as in weekly or monthly or quarterly. I knew for them to check out, it was part of their nature, right? And so then that's this little conversation within that is, how do we handle, or how do you respond to the influx of inboxes of how are you navigate? How are you feeling? Like the world is icky right now. How are you feeling? And some of the people, because it's not genuine, because I knew they were not genuine. Mm-hmm. You have to give everyone their chance. They're reaching out, but how do you respond in a way that is respectful or not pushing it away? So that was a huge conversation out of that. The other conversation on the personal side is really with my son. I have a 9-year-old son who is terrified of cops. He's terrified when he sees lights, whether it's the ambulance light, any type of lights, it triggers him. And so that was another conversation that I know for our family, we had to make the time to address and to see the trauma of my son. Like if a car run past us, his heart, he would have a panic attack. So those were like the two bigger things that came out of this. Like really, okay, I wasn't really, for me as a professional in the online coaching space, having the conversation around race, I will say how to respond for me, it was uncomfortable. So I had to learn how to have those very difficult conversations and how to advise our clients on that. Personally, it was, how do I begin to have this conversation with my son so early? Like the veil, the scales have been lifted from his eyes. He is aware of it, and to see him hurt. But how do we have these conversations that does not create more harm, does not incite more fear, but allows him to be empowered and bring us together? So those were like two major things I had to take away from the George Floyd occurrence.
Thank you. And that's so I hope people really realize that the impact that all of this has had on children, right? When people say, oh, your child shouldn't be scared of the police. The police are friendly, not for Black children, right? That is not, for most Black children, that is not the perception. That is not their lived experience. And even for, Black people in general, right? My son has been, if you've watched my TEDx, my son's been the victim of police brutality. And even now, if a police officer, engages him, he just shakes. So, these things really get deep into people's souls. And so when we were talking about the relationships, I know from having discussions with you, Lisa, that this, the conversations around race and racism really did have an impact on your family relationships. So talk about that. Like what were when you hear about all the things that were going on, like what was the expectation of how your family would respond versus the reality of the response?
So I expected my family to do more of the same. Started the first really big case that I was aware of that affected me was Trayvon Martin, because he's the same age as my oldest son. And my oldest son is autistic and has looked like a grown man since he was 14 years old. And he would react not in the traditional way to someone approaching him, the reaction then of my relatives was like, well, if I saw a big Black guy walking down the street, and I'm like, no, I don't get that. It's just a guy walking down the street with the hoodie on. It doesn't matter, and if it's raining and he's ducking under, porches and things like that, that's what a kid does. You ask him, are you lost? You don't pull your gun out, and I had these arguments over and over and over again with my family members. I've always been the family communist, by the way. I like everybody that's different than me. Like I've got the Appalachian white people heritage. Like I've got that down, lived in it, know it. I want to explore something that's different than my own story, right? So when George Floyd happened, my father called me and said, all these years you've been talking about this and I never saw it. And to see the smirk of that cop's face as he choked that man out with his knee on his neck, he said, there are no words. And he got so very verklempt and choked up about that he actually, there was a African-American gentleman that he walks with at the community gym. So he goes up to Wally and he says, I want to talk to you about George Floyd. Blew me away. I didn't think that my father would have that kind of courage to do that. And so Wally tells him about being shipped out to Vietnam and not being able to use the restroom at the airport they were at. He's about to risk his life and limb for this nation that won't even let him drink out of the water fountain in the airport. And so it has turned my father's viewpoint all the way around. And it's funny because, he says things to me like, I've never really believed in a mixed marriage. Now, the funny part, my mother's Native American. He's in a mixed marriage that he doesn't believe in. So he's, and even more now, I've gotten our DNA back. And it shows that we are 3% from Cameroon area in Africa. So I'm like,
take your dad out. Don't give him all that information.
I'm like, somebody, we believed in it a long time, for us. But yeah,
That's a
so
great story. I love that. I love
that,
that.
yeah,
because-
so that really, really was significant for me. And, I lived in a Black neighborhood in Atlanta in the middle 90s. That's where my older kids were born and grew up. And so I have a different appreciation than my family members who have lived in homogeneous pockets where they don't see, they go, months and years without seeing people different than they are.
Mhm.
And it was something that I made a conscious effort when I was raising my kids to have all the colors of the rainbow in their world. In fact, my youngest, when he was about 6, he came home from school and he asked me why we didn't know any Black people. And I said, what do you mean? Wayne, Jacob, Miss Cheryl, I'm naming them all off. And he's, Mama, they have brown skin. They are not Black.
Oh, wow.
So, it's just
Kids,
the way
they're innocent, right? They're taught.
Yeah.
So the relationships that we have and the,
Yeah.
the people that we have around our children are important because they teach, right? Hate is taught, racism is taught. So that's really important. And I want to pick up on that whole concept of the people around you and having a village. And Cindy, I want to bring this to you. People always talk about it takes a village. What does that mean to you, and how is that important to the relationships that you have with your family, your friends, your coworkers?
Well, for me, taking a village means that you can't do it by yourself. And, none of us do anything really by ourselves. Nobody's self-made, all that nonsense. There's always someone that is in your corner in some way, shape, or form. And sometimes that support is as simple as a smile when you needed it most. It doesn't have to be financial support or watching your kid for you, or, it's just in some way, shape, or form, you are surrounded by people who care. And from my perspective, your village doesn't just have to be DNA, because I think that's another toxic trait that we learn growing up, just like racism is learned and hate and all of that, that accepting your family, no matter what, because you share DNA, I think is equally as toxic, because toxic is toxic regardless of your familial connection. And so we stay in abusive relationships with parents or siblings or aunts, uncles, cousins, because, well, they're family. And it's not okay just because they're family. So for me, your village is who you choose to have in your village. Where they're like, LWL is my village. We have cried together, we have laughed together. And a lot of us have never actually face to face, belly to belly, had that hug that I am so craving. But we have shared some of the most intimate moments together as a village. And so for me, that's just that support that you get from those that you care about, whether they be blood related or not. So I think the village is what you make it, and none of us makes it alone. As if the pandemic has taught us anything, it's that we need each other.
Yeah.
And, politics, religion, you name the issue may try to divide, separate us. But at the end of the day, we need each other. And so for me, my village is the one that I choose to have surrounding me.
I like that part of it. That your village is who you choose, right? We always talk about, it takes a village, and people do say to you, oh, you gotta be with your friends and with your family. No, sometimes no. Sometimes no, you need to be away from them too. Right.
So it is ugly, but I don't have to connect with you.
That's right. That's right.
You know,
Teresa, what do you think about the whole concept of having a village, and how has that helped you as far as relationships? You're on mute, hon.
Village is everything for us. I mean, my husband's from Birmingham. I'm from New York. We live in Philly. So we didn't have any family close to us, right? So, and like I said, we lived on a college campus. Not only did we live on a college campus, but we ran a home program for my son for 6 years, 40 to 50 hours a week, every day, no breaks. The people who helped us I ran the program. I recruited people to be in the program with us. So I created a village. I interviewed people that I met at yoga studios, people that I met at the Whole Foods Market. College students were a big part of that as well. People who I didn't know these people, but these strangers became friends. And these people volunteered their time. Most of them volunteered, most of them weren't paid. So, but these became our village, our closest friends and family who cried with us, who washed my clothes for me, who watched my daughter for me, who ran errands for me, all of them. And they were literally all over the world, different religions, different ethnicity. We developed, I called them our angels, and I invited them to be a part of our miracle. So I'm all about the village. Not only were they a blessing to us, but our family was a blessing to them. And we all learned from each other in the process. So you don't have to know the people that become your greatest friends and champions, you know? Mm-hmm.
When I was, at least I'll bring it in 1 second. When I was in college and I was 21 years old and I got pregnant, village was so important to me, right? Mm-hmm. So to have my cousins and my friends who jumped in, to babysit and, to just help me out. It's so important to have people around you. I am sort of a loner. Like, I like to be by myself, but I do have a huge village, and I love our LWL village because, as Cindy said, most of us have never, ever met in person. But you couldn't tell us that. You couldn't tell us that. We are like the best of friends and we'll do anything for each other. And so that's the importance of really having your village. So Lisa, jump on in this one.
So I just wanted to make a quick point. Some of my Black friends, when the George Floyd thing first started happening, were saying you have to cut out of your life all the racist people in your life. You can't have them in your life. And one of the things that I took particularly serious about that is there's a next generation beyond the adults that are the racists in your family. And if you remove yourself every time, from every situation that way, those little kids don't ever see anything but the racists. So that's just another thing that I want people to think about is, I will have arguments with some of my relatives, and I will still go to the picnic, and I will still go to the family reunion, and I will show myself, but I'm showing my nieces and nephews and cousins' children's, there is a different way to think. It's not the only way. And unfortunately, in a lot of those pockets, particularly those with Appalachian heritage, where it's very homogeneous, the community is very homogeneous, that's all the kids hear. And it goes back to you learning about what you said about racism being taught. Yeah. They have to see something different. I'm not quite sure how I came out of that a little different, but, I've been weird all my life. So,
Go ahead, Ty.
I just want to say here, like for me, in terms of village, I got really emotional when you brought up this topic of a village. This is I've experienced numerous traumatic experiences as a child, from third grade being molested to, drowning, and some people watching me drowning. But so many incidents over and over again taught me or conditioned me to not trust anyone outside of myself. And that didn't go away, when I got older. I really didn't thrive well in the workspace, which is why I'm an entrepreneur. Immediately, I just could not thrive as an employee because I didn't trust people. And so I decided to launch out on my own. And I was able to, segue into a very beautiful and profitable entrepreneur journey. But even as an entrepreneur, I can only get myself so far. And one of the things I realized when you say this word, your village, we were not created to reach our full potential alone. Like, we cannot reach our full potential alone. And one of the things that taught me this more than it was a space when I was super vulnerable. This is a couple of years So I was a hairstylist for 15 years, decided that I wanted to transition from hairstylist to having my own coaching business. And I was really new, coaching and speaking, never done it before, but this is my dream. I'm going to do it. Sold my salon, stepped over into coaching, and I did make a major investment, a life-changing investment that really my family had. We had to have the kind of investment that you have talks with everybody. Like, we're modifying our lifestyle so that we could move our family forward. So at the same time I made this major investment, my daughter, I found out that she was cutting. And so found out this, so got with a mentor. She was shaping me in my business. We're going to plan your first event. We're going to package your services. And so I'm just going to say I invested like $50,000, everything I had. I just need this business to work. And so right when I put myself out there, I get the news that my daughter is cutting a week before I host my first event. So my business never got off the ground. Like, I just was so totally deflated. This is one of the moments where I really learned the value of a village. Like, I had no choice but to be vulnerable, where before I would be ashamed and be afraid that I'd be seen as a failure and I'm unworthy and this is not going to happen. My people already thought I was crazy for investing this kind of money. I'm just going to prove them right. I shared with my coach about what was going on, and the overpouring, the love. I could not serve a client. I had to shut down a few clients that I did have, and they sold into me. They made sure that my family did not go without a meal. They made sure that they connected me to other business owners that could use the support that I could, that I provided. And business opportunity after business opportunity just flowed into my life. But that was that point where I had to lean into the village. This is where I learned the value of a village, what it meant to be vulnerable, what it meant to really trust others. And here I am, this is 5 years later, my business is super amazing, like financially secure, really because of the decision to allow myself to have a village, to gift myself a village, to allow people to not only see the strong, bold, courageous Ty, but also to see me in my weakness and allow their abundance to strengthen whatever spaces or gaps that I had in that very temporary moment. And so you just cannot reach your full potential. My life would not be what it is without moments like that, when my village just stepped up in major unexpected ways. It's really just blown my mind. And now I have to give that same thing. Like, I live to expand my village. So that being said, Kelly, thank you so much for Ladies Who Leverage, because this is just an extension of that very same thing.
Thank you so much. And thank you for sharing that story. I think it's so important for us to share the things that we've gone through. Obviously, share at your own time and your own pace and whatever. And the thing that you were saying, Ty, about guilt and shame and not wanting to say what's going on because it can come back, you think, oh, people are going to think, that does cause us a lot to hold back and really not engage our village. We always say, listen, I came into this world alone, right? No, we didn't. Mom pushed you out. Doctor helped you. Somebody cut the umbilical cord. They made sure that you were okay. They cleaned you up, right? So from the very beginning, we've always had a village, right? People that we know and people that we don't know. So it's so important. Stevie, I want to bring you in because most everyone on here is an entrepreneur. Lisa's kind of a side hustling entrepreneur, but everyone else, I believe, is a full-time entrepreneur. And that can be a very lonely place to be. So Stevie, when starting your business, how do you find support and encouragement from a family who may not understand anything about being an entrepreneur and what it means to just like, oh, I'm going to be my own boss? How do you find that support? What kind of tips can you provide to someone who's on this journey?
Yeah, absolutely. I think to everybody's point, it does take a village. And I think that we do need to recognize that. But as entrepreneurs, I think that village can sometimes be not family on purpose, right? There is something about business and family that's hard. And I work with my husband full time, so I understand. And I had a business with my parents in the past. So I know how family and business can work. I also know how it doesn't work. But I think for anybody who's going out on their own and doing something different, it can be so hard for other people to understand, right? They don't understand why, when you say to when you say to your mom at night, gosh, I wish that client had come through and had bought, and they're like, well, you can just go back and get a job, right? I mean, it's no big deal. I think it's important to really think about who do you have around you. So obviously, as a coach, I'm a big believer in coaching. I know we have coaches on here. Finding that person who has gone before you, has done it, can share with you insight and advice, but also can held you up when you need it, to Ty's story of a coach pouring into you. I think that's what coaching is all about. So I definitely recommend that entrepreneurs find coaches who will do that for them. Like I say, coaching should be a big hug and a kick in the butt all at the same time. And that's what a lot of us need as entrepreneurs. But I think for yourself, if you're struggling with how to find support, find people who understand. One of the first things I did, and Kelly, it's what you've done with Ladies Who Leverage. When I started my business 6 years ago, the first thing I did was started a Facebook group. And I said, I'm just inviting people who are also entrepreneurs who get it. And my Facebook group had 5 of my friends. But man, was that the group I needed. So that when I had a bad sales call, when I didn't want to prospect, when I didn't want to write another weekly email that nobody was going to open, I had somebody there saying, you got this. It's okay. So I think it's about, number one, finding a coach or a supporter, somebody to give you that mentorship, that advice. I think the second thing I would say is find other people who are going through it and bond together, really bond together and have that. I think the third thing is, if you have the right relationship, and every relationship is different, but if you have a relationship in your family where you can be honest with your expectations and say, hey, look, right, I love you and I know you just want the best for me. And I love you for that. What I need from you in these moments where I complain about work, because we all complain about work, no matter who you're working for, you complain about work. In these moments where I'm complaining about work, what I need you to say to me is, and then you tell them what you need them to say. We need to set those expectations with our family members because they don't know how to support us. They don't know how to encourage us because it's a world that they don't understand. And so being able to say, I need you at dinner when I'm talking later tonight, by the way, is family dinner. So I'm saying this in advance. My mother is probably watching. Hi, Mom. Later tonight, when I complain about my work and I complain about the sales call I didn't close or something like that, asking them to say, hey, I don't want you to bring up going back and getting another job. I don't want you to bring up the fact that you chose this path, my child. I don't want you to bring that up. I want you to say, you got this. We believe in you. And you'd be amazed sometimes just telling someone what you need to hear will create support for you. And to go back to what some of the other wonderful women on this call, it's been so inspiring, have said, it doesn't have to always be family. My village does include family, but it's not limited to family. And I will embrace anyone who comes in with that unconditional support and love, because to me, that's what family is all about. And so your village and your tribe can be anybody you reach out to and say, I could just use your support. I think if we ask for it, it will show up for us.
Thank you. Teresa, what do you think about that? What do you think is some good advice for, we'll say women, because it's our Women's History Month. What is good advice for women who want to venture out, but feel that maybe the people that are closest to them don't support them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I ventured out. I just launched in October, so I'm a newbie, right? And my husband is very supportive, but he doesn't understand everything that Stevie just said. So he doesn't really understand what I'm doing. So, and I just was I'm a high achiever. I get tunnel vision. I love what I do. So I just started working all the time. And so, just having those conversations, just helping him to understand, like, I just love this so much and I have to put boundaries around it. I get it. So I need you to help me because I want to stay present with you. I want to stay present with with the kids. But honestly, I was just so lit up. I would be with them, but I'm thinking about the business, I'm just like, I don't want to do family night. I want to work on this, So I really had to put some boundaries around myself because I was so passionate about it. And just having those conversations like, listen, I love you guys, but I just really love this. And I just need you. It's okay for you to tap me on the shoulder and say, okay, mom, we need to be together at this point, right? So just giving them a window into my world and giving them permission, to tap me on the shoulder. That was a big thing. The second thing is I have great support, but I didn't have any entrepreneurs in my world, right? So I felt very lonely. Last year, this time, I was like, I kept saying, I need people who understand what I'm doing. And I want people that are ahead of me, that I can learn from and I can grow. And so, and then just, I believe when you set an intention, you put it out there, you'll begin to attract that. And just slowly, I just kept meeting people. Precious, I met Precious and I connected. And actually everything happened from Precious. After Precious turned me on to Ty, and Ty is here in Philly. So me and Ty, I was able to be with someone in person, and we talk, and Ty came coaching me. And then Precious turned me on to Ladies Who Leverage, and I got a whole posse now. And, out of that, other relationships. So like this year is totally different from last year, right? But I think it's important to be aware of that and then to take action, do whatever you need to do. I've also joined some other, a mastermind, being willing to make that investment so that you can be around the people. If you don't have friends, you can pay to get some friends.
Right. Right.
You got to do what you need to do, right? Because if you have a vision for yourself and you know where you want to go, you have to surround yourself with the people that are in alignment with where you want to go. Yeah. So that was important. And then the last thing, I think for me that was so important is just to be patient. And we were on the call last night, and y'all know I fell apart. But
we got you.
Y'all got me, right? And just to be patient, just to be patient and know that if you surround yourself with the right people, you're taking action, you're doing all the things you need to do, and you consistently show up, all will be well. It will happen in time. You just got to, be patient with the process. This is Teresa, and I am complete.
And you are done speaking. Miss Deani will be happy to hear you say that. Deani, the governor of Clubhouse. I want to direct this question to you, Cindy. What are the critical, we're talking about relationships. So we've talked about friendships and, coworkers and familial relationships, but what are the critical characteristics for building a successful relationship in any of those areas?
Well, my answer is going to be the same across the board for any of those relationships. The critical factor in the quality of your relationship with your significant other, with your kids, with your family, with your coworkers, is the quality of the relationship with yourself. Everything that you do is built on your relationship with yourself. So you're at war with yourself. And then you are bleeding on people who did not cut you because you have unresolved issues within yourself. So everything stems from your own wellspring. And if that wellspring is cluttered with insecurities and trauma and generational baggage and messy DNA and all kinds of things, it's a cliche, but you can't give what you don't have. And so if you have those, unhealed mother wounds, unhealed father wounds, whatever the issue is, and if you are human walking on the planet, you have an issue, because that's just how we roll out here, having the human experience. And so everybody needs to have therapists. I'm just saying, ain't no shame in that game. But it's all, for me, based on your relationship with yourself. And so all of those relationships, like if everybody here has kids, I think everybody here has kids, or you've have a relationship with someone that you tried to control their behavior, and it's been, let's see, unsuccessful in controlling their behavior. Why? You can't control your own behavior. Listen, I ate the cookies when I should have ate the salad. I can't control my own behavior. So how on earth am I going to be expected to control the behavior of others? And so when in relationship, for me, it springs from your relationship with yourself and dealing with yourself and your issues and personal development. You have therapists and have some personal development coaching and get your mind right, because if not, you're going to continue to just bleed all over people, project your issues. And for me, a lot of relationship conflict comes down to communication. And communication is a two-way street. So we're communicating with one another and we're each understanding what the other's saying, but also not just communication, it comes from expectation. Mm-hmm. Because we are holding people accountable for unmet expectations that they didn't agree to.
Yeah. I think that's a big thing
of how somebody should behave. They didn't agree. They didn't sign that contract. But we're holding them to it anyway. And then we are dumping on them when they don't meet those expectations. So it's always about you.
Yeah, that's a big thing, right? That's a big thing, that we have expectations that we haven't communicated to the other person, and then they fail to live up to that expectation, and we're mad. Well, they didn't know.
Or like mind reading, right? Like, I'm going to make a sweeping generalization here. So forgive me, women, for this sweeping generalization, but I've never been a man. I've never identified as a man. So this is my lived experience as a woman. We do it in relationship. We expect our partner to know, right? Well, he should know, or she should know. Why don't they know? Like, we expect that they should have done something. We expect that they should know why we're mad. We expect that they should know what we wanted. And not that your partner or sister or best friend doesn't know you, but just having that expectation that they should just know. And so you be mad, and he says, why are you mad? Oh, as if you don't know. I mean, but we haven't communicated it. And he's mad about something he didn't know he was even supposed to do. So we're going to
Sandy, I want to bring you, thank you, Cindy. Sandy, I want to bring you in on this. What do you think are critical characteristics for building a successful relationship?
I don't know. I'll let you know when I figure it all out. But this conversation, though, I was over here like, I felt like, what was that show? Welcome Back, Kotter.
Oh yeah.
Does anybody remember it?
I'm a little yourself. I love Welcome Back, Kotter.
So, because when Ty said, we're not meant, I don't remember exactly how you said it, but we're not meant to be walking this journey alone, right? Like something along those lines. And that really reminded me, and we were talking about the village, and it reminded me about when I started to learn how to build relationships, in particular with women, right? Like, and this happened to me in 1993. I'm a member of a 12-step fellowship. And that's where I started to learn that I'm not alone, right? And something else that Ty said that really just triggered this thought process in my head about the village, that my village has these little mini cities in it, right? Like I've got my 12-step village, and I learned the value of raising my hand and saying I'm hurting, right? Like I'm not okay. Because nobody can help me if I don't do that, if I don't say it out loud, even though it's scary. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it can be really scary, because, I'm supposed to be strong, independent woman, right? Like, which I am, but I still get scared. And when I open my business, Lisa, I related to you too. And Stevie Dawn, what you were talking about with family and, Lisa, it doesn't have to be from Appalachia. I it's what I can tell you, and it's, what was I going to say about that? when I opened my business, right? My dad is a businessman. He grew up, I grew up in this little store. He did not understand what I was doing. Like, what is like my dad understands that you have a widget and you sell widgets, right? Like, and so his fear and my expectations that Cindy just talked about, my expectation was, Dad, I'm going to open this business. And for him to say, okay, go for it. I believe in you. All the things that I needed to hear, right? Which that didn't happen. And so I had to grieve a little bit through that. But God, spirit of the universe, higher power, whatever you call it, put those people that had the words and the love that I needed to hear in my life, right? To become a part of my village. And I can't talk about village without talking about, I might cry, my best friends, who I met on the dance floor. And they have become, Carmen, Miriam, Rosario, Tatiana, and a whole bunch more, right? That have become my core. They're my heart sisters. They're not like everybody's talked about. Doesn't have to be blood family, but these women are my heart sisters. And Amber, I couldn't do anything without them. Couldn't finish school. We just help each other. It's a, I don't know. It's a beautiful thing. And when I can be calm enough to be vulnerable, that's when beautiful things happen for me. That's my experience about that. So
that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
Talking.
Right.
Yeah.
We are so programmed. But thank you for sharing that story. And I think for women, it is important for us to just have people that we can rely on. And Ty, I want to bring you into that question, but also transition you into another question. So, talk with us about, what is needed for a successful relationship, but also as we now start to go back into workplaces, right? And we have been so isolated. What tips, strategies can you provide for people on how to now come back into those spaces and basically rekindle, these relationships and being able to function now in person, right? And social distancing and doing all of that.
Yeah. So the tail end of the last question is, I absolutely love that question. Relationships at the early part of my life was not something that I was really good at, but it's something that I knew I needed to master if I was going to be successful in life. And so for me, when I think about relationships, what are those key characteristics to be successful? I used to think that in a personal relationship, love mattered for a personal relationship. Like I need to love them. I need to like them, right? I used to think that respect was a requirement. I need to respect you in order to have a successful relationship with you. But what I realized is that neither love or respect are required for successful relationships. When they are present, it's like on steroids. Like it is incredible. But in order to have it, like if you have these other, and I have 4 things, just consistently that I rely on. One is trust. Mm-hmm. Do I trust this person? If I open myself to you, if I open what I need to you, do I trust that you will give this back? Do I trust that you will, handle the task? Do I trust that you're going to run through the red tape with whatever the thing is? The second one is committed to the end goal. So for a successful relationship, are they going to commit to the end goal? Meaning that obstacles may come. We may bump heads. We may not always agree, but are you going to commit to the end goal? Will I see you at the finish line? Right? And if you can commit to that, I believe that we can work out anything in between. Next would be just open communication for sure. So being able to set clear expectations. And then even with setting clear expectations, we're human. So things may not always flow the way that we want to. So being able to have those open doors of, to speak authentically and with compassion so that you can be heard. So, being able to listen. So all of that goes into the open communication. And then lastly, the relationship has to be mutually beneficial. Like everybody needs to win. Everybody needs to benefit from the relationship. And I find that when those 4 things are in place, trust, open communication, committed to the end goal, and it's mutually beneficial, even in the absence of love and respect, even because, love is an emotion. So you may not always like them. You may not always respect their perspective or their opinion on something. But with those other 4 things in place, you can definitely have strategic, successful, profitable, fulfilling relationships. And that's both personal and professional. Now, as we are transitioning, going back to the workspace after being online, I know a lot of companies who are staying remote, like they don't plan on bringing lots of teams back into work, but there are many who are going back to work. If you're not going back to work, you may be going back to hosting events where you'll still be working with large groups of people. So how do you begin to make that transition? And one of the things that I have been enjoying doing is hosting frequent, they're just like lunch meetings or coffee dates with colleagues. And not so much, I wasn't going to say with work, with colleagues, where you're really just catching up. So sometimes there's an agenda of really talking about new things that are going to be implemented so that you can manage expectations as they transition, in that way. But otherwise, it's really just starting that process of those icebreakers, getting to know one another. What have you been up to? Really building that rapport up and getting people excited about the culture of what that workplace is going to be post-COVID, or, I would say this new normal that we're embracing as we go back into the workplace. I also think it's very important that you have conversations to talk about some of the restrictions or guidelines that will be in place as you navigate back into COVID, right? You have the vaccines is a big thing. For those that are vaccinated, will it be required? Masks being personal responsibility. What does that look like? Eating lunch, the workspace, whether you was cubicles and all these different things, what to expect. I think the better you can communicate these things before they enter back into the workspace, the more ease and just less anxiety. So it gives everyone a nice round expectation of what that's going to be once they flow back in. Those are just a few things that I can think of for now.
And those are awesome things. I loved all of that. Dr. Stevie Dawn, I want to ask you about that. What kind of things can, people in general, but also organizations do to ensure that when they bring people back into the workplace, that we're not destroying relationships?
Yeah, I think the biggest one is going to be in the transition, we all need to learn how to give grace. We need to give grace to ourselves. We need to give grace to each other. One of my favorite phrases that I heard during this time in the last year was, we're all in the same storm, but we're not in the same boat. And I think as we transition back in, as Ty said, we're going to have to establish new expectations and new theories of where we're going and what does this look like, and vaccines and masks and all of these things. And I think what we need to do is make sure we're giving grace to each other, that transition is going to be different for every person. There are going to be some people who are, oh my gosh, we're back. I'm so excited. There are people, and there are probably some of them on this call. There are some people who learned they work better at home by themselves. They get more done. They're not looking forward to going back. So I think in order to save all the relationships, and there's going to be a lot of transition going on as people readjust to, are we allowed to hug again? What does this look like? I think we're going to need to just really tap into that, giving grace and patience and understanding that everybody's different. Everybody's going to have a different level of adjustment. Everybody's going to take a different amount of time to adjust. One of the things that I learned in my research when I was studying for my degree was every minute that you feel an emotion, it takes an equal minute to recover. So if you think about that, we've been in this emotional filled time for a long time. It's not going to go back to normal week 2, right? Don't give people, okay, 1 month and then we'll be fine. That's not how we're going to process that emotion. This is a year of emotion. we're going to process. It's going to take time. And so I think grace and patience are going to be the best ways to make sure we save those relationships coming back into the workplace.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think one of the things, the biggest mistakes that employers could make is to act as if it's back to normal, right?
Oh, yes.
That
Yes.
it's business as usual, that we're just going to, we're back and, going back.
Like it never happened. Do not pretend it never happened. It happened. It had an impact.
It did. And to also realize that people are going to be coming back having been through trauma.
Yes.
Right?
And we're going to have to really talk trauma-informed
Yes.
space, right?
That's right. That's right. And really understand
important.
the impact of this, that it has had on people, whether they have been in a space where they have encountered, somebody has died or somebody has lost, their job, or just anything, just having to be at home. So we talk about extroverts, right? Just having to be at home and not having that physical human connection, that's also a trauma. And so I think we're going to also, employers are going to really have to expand and really look at what does it mean? What has it meant for people to be in this space in order to ensure that we don't, destroy the relationships in an effort to just get back to business and get things going. Cindy, I'm going to come to you in 1 second. If anyone has any questions on Facebook, please let us put them in the Facebook. And if anyone who's joining us live has any questions, please put them in. We'll get to your questions. And after Cindy, I have one final question for the panel. So please jump in if you have any comments or questions. Cindy, go ahead.
Yeah, and you know me, I'm all about a good plan, right? So reentry action planning is really monumental in this process because there's a lot of things to consider, beyond. And yes, people are eager to get back to normal, but is normal what we want to get back to? Normal was the cause of some of the issues that we have. And then we have a whole unprecedented time that has gone on in between that continues to go on. And with with what happened with George Floyd, kicked off the entire social justice movement and the anti-racism movement and all of the new D&I factors, and with that, has uncovered, mental health issues. And so for employers to bring people back without really having done some serious re-entry action planning to understand, reevaluate their own business model, their own SOPs, operating procedures to see what were we doing before, what do we need to stop doing, what do we need to be doing different, what experts did we need to engage to ensure that the entry plan is safe, because depending upon who had COVID, who didn't have COVID, people could still get COVID. All of these things are at play. So the employers have a really, really big challenge ahead of them, understanding that the profit first model that we've always operated under in this country in a capitalistic society is not going to be what we can go back to. We have to start to make that transference to a people first model. And with that in mind, our businesses don't run without people. Like, we're all business owners. Our businesses don't run without people, don't run without customers. We need people for all the things. And so to start taking care of those people first and not just shareholder profits. And so it's just, to me, it's like a complete paradigm shift in how business operates. And, those conscious companies who are looking to operate in that way, I think are going to be the companies that we're going to see start to have success versus the profit first companies who have viewed their employees as expendable, because we learned that that's really not the case. So that's my 2 cents.
One of the things I always talk about when I train my clients is around, we always say it's either people or profits, profit or people, and it doesn't have to be that way. It can be profits and people, right? And so we really have to focus on that it has to be profits and people. So the last question, I didn't see any questions on Facebook or in the chat, but I was on LinkedIn today and there was a post, and the post said that my father died when I was 8, and every week when I would, I think it was played hockey or something, but when that person would go, one of the dads would step in to tie his skates, right? And they said, you know, he did it without any type of fanfare. They just stepped in to fill in the gap. And so my question for you all is, who is standing in the gap for you? And you don't have to name the person or anything like that, but when there is this space, right, between being aligned and not being aligned, right? And being your best self and not being your best self, being a badass and not being a badass. Who is that person that stands in the gap for you? And I'll start with Lisa Carper.
I have two gap fillers.
Okay.
So my first is my roommate from college, my BFF. Her name is Ruth Vincent. Now I had to remember which name she's under. She's had a few husbands, but I love her anyway. She is the sister that I have never, I have a sister. I shouldn't say I never had a sister, but we don't have the relationship that I want. And Ruth provides that to me, and we back each other up. The second person is Mark Hooper, who is my other BFF. We met about a decade ago when he was hired to teach me how to edit video in a nonlinear video editor. And we have continued to be friends, and now we're business partners. And we rely on each other so much. And now that I'm saying it, I have three. I forgot about my Portland filler. My Portland filler is Cindy Ward. She's in the audience. When it was first time for me to come to Portland, she was my first friend and my best friend here. And she is like I would say, she's another sister, although she'll tell me again that she's the same age as my mother, but we're sisters. So I'm fortunate. I have
three gap fillers. That's awesome.
Not to mention all of you ladies.
Oh yeah, we fill your gap too. Teresa, who's your gap filler? You're on mute, sweet.
I keep doing that. I'm very blessed with rich relationships. First of all, my husband is a gap filler. We've been married for 25 years, and we just work really well together, and we are able to speak truth to each other in a way that invites connection. So at any time, we can just share where we are and support each other in that. So I'm very thankful for that. I have a best friend who she's just my ride or die, right? So I just shoot her a text, call her, she's there. And then I have two groups. My church community, I go to a multicultural church, but there's a group, the Brown Skin Girls, and we've just been there for each other, particularly during everything that has happened during this time. Being in a multicultural church has raised a lot of conversations, a lot of difficult conversations. In white evangelical spaces can be very challenging. So the Brown Skin Girls, we've really been there supporting each other. And Ladies Who Leverage fills my gap as I build my business. So I'm very grateful for the spaces that I have.
That's awesome. Stevie, who's your gap filler?
So I'm going to have to copy Teresa on at least one of these and say I'm very rich in relationships, but my gap filler is my husband. He is my ride or die. He is my support. He tells me you got this. He tells me you can do anything. He tells me you don't need them. He does all the things. And especially when I am finding my place in a space of doubt or a space of lack, he is the person who comes and reminds me of my greatness. And I know that we all need those people in our lives. I am lucky to have more than just him, but for the sake of time, I would say he's my number one gap filler.
Thank you for sharing that. Sandy, who's your gap filler?
I have to say that God is my gap filler, because that, like I mentioned before, any number of people get put in front of me right when I need them. My friend Romy will call me, or, you know, two people, my sister, my oldest sister, who were born on the same day. My mother was very organized. Oh, that story goes on, but I won't tell. I mean,
My dad and I have the same birthday.
there's 6 of us, 3 birthdays.
Oh,
Like,
okay.
yeah, my mom was super anyway. You know, so my higher power puts exactly what I need, who I need, right in front of me when I need it, you know, and fills those gaps for me.
That's awesome. Cindy, who's your gap filler?
Well, I have multiple gap fillers depending on the size of the gap, whether it's a gaping wound or just a little tiny cut, or the style, like the type of gap. But my husband definitely fills gaps of all kinds, of all natures, of all sizes, shapes, colors, and forms, which I very much appreciate. And then I have my best friend who, you know, knows where all the bodies are buried and is going to stand in the gap no matter what, and taking it to the grave. And then I've got, you know, like biz besties, and just I too have been richly blessed from a relationship standpoint, and have always had love, support from someone or lots of someones to stand in the gap. So alone I have never stood, and I'm very much appreciative for that.
That is a great thing. That is an awesome thing to never be alone. Ty, who stands in the gap for you?
Yes, so first and foremost, let me just say this. I haven't always been this, or have had the privilege of saying this. And I call it an alter ego, or my higher self, and her name is Elba. And this is just my divine self. So I notice when I'm off. I notice when I'm not being bold, courageous. And so I'm a metaphysician as well. And so mindfulness and meditation, those are all things that are part of my day to day. So calibrating myself every morning, where I can just speak to myself, learn to be my best friend. So I'm a gap filler. So I'm now a gap filler for myself, when before I would run and tuck my tail and hide. So I have to just say that off the bat. My husband, undoubtedly, he is a gap filler. He's superhuman at times, and super supportive in everything. And then I have a community. I have that village for sure, where it's too many to name, but I have a village who are there to tell me, girl, you lost your mind, to, you know, who we finna F up tonight, to a glass of wine, like we gonna go slash some tires, to, you know what, don't offer your products at that price anymore.
Yeah.
From now on, you are at $20,000 to that, add whatever to that. You know, up late at night, helping me creating offers because I have a goal to do something. Okay, I'm going to put out some time to help you create a new program, and all you got to do is go sell it. And I've done that. They stand in the gap with me. So too many to name, but they've been there for a spectrum of things in all sorts of ways. So yeah, I'm very grateful.
I love it. So for me, so my husband stands in the gap, but he's a very silent person. My husband's very quiet. If anyone's met my husband, he's 6'7", but he's very quiet. He doesn't say a lot, but he creates the space and the atmosphere for me to do all of these amazing things that I do, and just, you know, silently behind me, pushing me. Also, my Irie family, we call ourselves the Irie family, which is my sister and my son and my cousins and my aunts and my mom and all of us. That's my Irie family. And obviously, ladies who leverage, like I never imagined, never envisioned what Ladies Who Leverage has become. And
We love you, Kelly.
you all fill a gap. And I'm so proud of you. Every day I watch, I listen, I see. It brings me such joy to watch all of you. It's why I do what I do every day. It's why, you know, I have learned how to become a web designer and a video editor. Thank you, Lisa Carper. It's why, you know, we're doing What's the Tea. It is my greatest joy to have Ladies Who Leverage as a vehicle to show the world who you all are and to continue to do that, because there's such greatness in Ladies Who Leverage. And to the extent that I can fill the gap in helping you not be in the shadows, to the extent that I can be in the gap to help you to create the influence and impact that I know that we can create, not only individually but collectively. So I thank you all for standing in the gap for me and helping me to move this vision forward. And though this is our last What's the Tea episode for Women's History Month, it is not the last of Ladies Who Leverage. We are going to be doing all kinds of amazing things. Last night, after our summit, we were texting and saying we should do a Ladies Who Leverage summit on Clubhouse. So we're in the midst of figuring out how we're going to do a Ladies Who Leverage summit on Clubhouse. And we will continue to do things like this, because what I have realized in, just having this series is the impact that we're making on women, just having these real conversations, really talking about issues that impact us every single day. And maybe, as we were talking about villages, there might be women out here who don't have that village. And so if we can provide that space for them, even for 90 minutes, right, for them to have people that they can relate to and hear stories of, I think that we're doing a great thing. So Ladies Who Leverage, as I mentioned before, is a global community of women who empower each other, right, to leverage our expertise, resources, and relationships to build our business, our brand, and our badassery. But as you can see, it is much more than that. We are truly a family. As I said, most of us have never even met in person, but you would not know that from the connections that we've made. So if you are a female entrepreneur, if you are a side hustler, if you are a woman in transition, and you are looking for a space where women are going to support you, who are going to push you, they're going to hold you accountable, then you need to come and join us in Ladies Who Leverage. You can go to teamlwl.com and you can join us in Ladies Who Leverage. Listen, this is a safe space. We don't compete. We collabosource. Collabosourcing is our word for how we network, but it's networking with love and support and caring. And we will show up for you. We will show out for you. So we are all about unleashing our badassery and living life unapologetically AF. And my new book, which will be coming out in July, is called 51 Ways to Unleash Your Badassery and Live Life Unapologetically AF. So look out for that, because we're going to do a book launch, and we're going to relaunch Ladies Who Leverage to the world. So if you want to join us, please do so. Also, the entire series of What's the Tea is on thetea.live. So once this renders, I will add this one to it. Please feel free to watch, to share, to let us know in the comments if you have any questions. And like I said, come join us in Ladies Who Leverage, teamlwl.com. Thank you, ladies. Thank you, everyone who joined us on Facebook and who joined us live in the audience. We so appreciate you, and I hope you had an amazing Women's History Month, and go kicking ass and unleash your badassery.